Welcome, my expert panelists, first of all, and welcome everybody in the chat. We have 25 people listening. I would like to say hello to everybody, and you probably have read the outline of our president, Gary Jacobs, to this session on one side, so you're kind of familiar with the questions behind what we like to discuss. My idea is that we have two rounds. In the first round, I would like to ask each of you one question. And in the second round, I would be very happy to get you more detailed view on what Gary Jacobs outlined in the preliminaries. My question to each of you is going to be the same question. I would like to start maybe with Paul, and then with Katalin, and then with Denis, and then with John, if you agree. If we agree that we are facing systemic poly crisis, climate crisis, etc., is the model of open societies, as Karl Popper coined them 75 years ago, is open societies and democracy with more decentralized form of power aggregation, the right form to focus and to solve these problems? Or do we need rather top-down autocratic regimes to better solve the poly crisis we're heading? Is that the shift we are experiencing now? In one sentence, who can do better? Open societies or autocracies? Decentralized systems or more systems which enact along a top-down scenario? Okay, Paul, I would like to get your feedback on that question. You worked in trilateralism as a director in so many fields. Do you have a first thought on that question?
Well, I mean, to start, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you also to the Academy. Basically, I would say two things. First of all, we have to be a bit careful in putting one against the other, autocracies versus democracies, if I may call it like that. I'm a bit worried these days that you have this black and white approach to the regulation of international affairs. It is obvious that in a global framework, the issues that we have to tackle can only be tackled for obvious reasons at a global level. But at the same time, we need to be careful in as much as national and local levels are the tools by which we will be able to tackle these global issues. And if we start sort of playing democracies and autocracies against each other, at the end of the day, the issues that need to be tackled won't find a solution. Now, this is, of course, very dangerous to say it like that, especially coming from Europe, because there, of course, we see very much the old framework of an East-West divide, autocracies versus democracies. But if we go back into a more serious, concrete North-South, if I may say, approach, there, of course, suddenly it becomes different. And so we have to, our mindsets are still very much Cold War mindsets, North Atlantic and European. So it's, and this mindset is coming back to the fore, by the way, with what's happening in Ukraine and in Russia. Let's be careful in the way we try and find a proper solution to addressing these global challenges. I think that at the end of the day, that is the issue that we have to find, where we have to find a solution.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Katalin, I'm still sticking to my question. Who can do better? Which societal formation, rather a shift towards more decentralized, polycentric, or more towards, call it autocratic or top-down, who can do better coping with the poly crisis? What kind of shift in power is required in order to make that happen?
somehow who has served so many decades around the UN, in different places of the UN, I first of all had to learn that the way I think, or the way we think, we Europeans think, this is just one way of thinking about the world. And very often I felt that the problem was with everything, that we thought that's the only way to move on. Obviously, when we are talking about questioning how we can move forward together, meaning globally, and I am very much believing whatever is going on, how strongly UN as a structure is challenged or multilateralism is challenged. But I would also say that this year, when we, of course, are thinking about the UN, which is an 80-year-old organization, we just have to say that the achievements, whatever we did in multilateralism, in global cooperation, and the results, they were the results very often of painstaking effort by the people from different nations, different countries, different cultures. So I have learned throughout the negotiations with different countries that one thing is your standpoint and the other thing is the other one, and the many other ones. So we can't, of course, simply turn our backs to our hard-won legacy. That's why I believe that the global cooperation is the only way for us. And there are different examples. There are different examples which can work for the people. Now, the question is, how, for me at least, how you can combine your interest or your people interest, if you are running a country or even an organization, how can you combine the interest of your people, the interest of globally of all the other peoples? Because very often we've seen different examples through which countries, cultures, nations, ambassadors talk to me. Yes, Katalin, I understand what you are saying, but you have to understand I'm coming from another direction. So for me, number one is that wherever you work, wherever you serve, I would say, or wherever, if you are in a position being in an administration, first you have to think about the people whom you are representing. If you happen to come to a country in which you were elected, which I would like to say globally, when we think about this question, is not always the case. Because very often in many countries, we see the same people running the country for many decades. And I wouldn't even say always that they don't do a good job. It depends, how the people feel over there. That's why I think the social development of the civil society is something what, of course, I think we are going to talk later on. So I would, in a way, back Paul idea that the division of the two models, I don't believe is the right way to choose. I think if we talk about global cooperation or solving our problems globally, and we cannot solve just as a nation state, we know that, then we have to see what differences, what kind of approaches different countries, cultures, societies have. And we have to listen. We have to listen why they do choose the way they want to run their country, or they want to get their interest, approach other people as well. So I understand your question, Stefan. Obviously, being a European, I would say, obviously, we have to fight to strengthen democracy. I obviously would like to say that I would like to see the representation of the people through democratic elections, giving enough strength to civil society to hear the voice of the most marginalized people. But if I'm thinking about a global collaboration in the world, especially in multilateralism, I always say that we have to see the other players as well, where they are coming from, what is their cultural background, and what is the model which is working for them.
Yeah. Katalin, very, very thanks for your rich experience in practical diplomacy and negotiation. Denis, is it okay that I still stick to my primary questions to get into a debate about who can do better?
Well, I suppose, look, first of all, I've been a parliamentarian directly elected for 28 years,
Yeah, I know.
and represented the Interparliamentary Union globally. So I'm going to come down very firmly on one side of this debate rather than the other as a result of that. But I think Catalina is quite correct in what she says. We have different types of decentralized democracy or decision making in many parts of the world, not all of them along the model that we would understand in Europe. And I think we need to acknowledge that there are other perspectives, there are other mechanisms and methods to run and operate governments. But having said all of that, there is a clear commitment within the Sustainable Development Goals, which all governments around the world have signed up to have more participatory decision-making processes with civil society, with citizens around the country. So my answer to your question would be, it's not about a debate in terms of a shift in power. It's more about a debate in terms of a shift in mindset. How do we accommodate different perspectives? And coming back to the comment that Paul made at the outset when he said, there are global issues there. We need to come together through some type of multilateral mechanism to come forward with solutions. But the reality is that these can only be addressed in practical terms at local level. So unless you're engaging with your citizens, unless you're bringing your citizens and communities along that road with you, then you're actually going to fail to deliver. And we've seen so many times, international agreements, whether it's in relation to climate change, sustainable development goals, we can go on, where we've had business involved, where we've had civil society involved, where we've had unanimity from the global community, but yet when it comes to delivery on the ground, we're failing dismally to achieve that. And I think what we do need to do is to look again in how we engage with citizens. The traditional models that we've used are failing, and that's globally, but also take the European Union, which is a very good example, where one of the key methods of engagement is through public consultation, both the European Union and the European Commission, but also in terms of devolved administration of European rules at domestic level in member states. There's a condition there that there has to be public consultation. And yet that public consultation and the models that we've used to date have failed dismally sometimes to bring the type of agreement that is needed to apply and deliver regulations and directives in many member states. So the point I'm making is, I think we need to go back and look, are there other models of engaging with citizens that actually sustain democracy, but sustain citizen engagement and citizen buy-in? And I think there are some of them emerging out there today. And hopefully that's something that we can explore later in the discussion.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's very good. So what I'm understanding is, beyond this dichotomy between top-down and polycentric, the most important is to come up with mechanisms and forms where citizens can be engaged, regardless whether through a democratic vote or through a top-down mandate. John, thank you for having us here in this debate. I will still stick in this first round with the initial question of who can do better, and with all your experiences in media and beyond, just help us. What is your point?
Yeah, well, first of all, to try to be true to your question, the first thing I would say is I hope we don't find out the answer.
Okay.
And that would indicate a bias on my part.
Why?
And if it needs to be said, towards the more democratic. But I think if we accept that we're in a change of eras, of civilizational eras, the truthful answer is we don't know, because it is not. If we're entering a new era, we don't know. I would say historically, at least recent history, the more democratic approach has been the better on the preponderance of the evidence, and hopefully that will persist in the next era. But again, to be intellectually honest, we don't know that answer. And some of the things that I worry about most are that I cited this in an earlier panel. There's recent studies of kind of sentiment of populations overall globally, and the predominant theme of folks is one around grievances, right? And we've certainly seen that in Brexit. We saw it in the U.S. elections. And when you have a grievance mindset, it's a zero-sum game. You look at the world as a zero-sum game, and if it's a zero-sum game, then you're only interested in your immediate interests, and it flows there. And obviously, there are systems such as social media to amplify that and to to only make that much more prevalent and organized in groups, etc. And at the same time, you have now in America in particular the rise of a group of folks in the technology industries who believe that not only in technology as a guiding light, but in themselves as the guiding light. And they're in unprecedented positions of influence and power, again, often through social media. So there are indications we may actually find out the answer to your question.
Okay. This is that kind of a first round just to get warm up on these questions. Paul, if I understand you right, this black and white is not helpful. North and South would detect completely different ways of doing it, and the Western approach is a very, very biased approach. Can you get more practical about the relevance of this shift in power which is required to solve these problems?
Well, basically, I would like to come back to what actually Denis mentioned, which is there are ways and means of moving ahead, and there the European model, I think, is still very much a valid model in trying to find solutions to global issues. It's basically, and it's in our treaty, the principle of subsidiarity and the principle of proportionality. This is applied, as you know, in the European treaties, and this gives basically to the decisions are taken at the lowest level possible where citizens are engaged. It ensures that power is sort of exercised as close to the citizens as possible. So I think that's one way ahead. Mm-hmm. Another problem that we in the West have to grapple with is double language. That is something that I know many of you at the World Academy, but also at NGIC, have been discussing over the years. This double language can no longer persist in, if I may say, North-South context. And
what do you mean by double language?
Well, the double language is basically that the West has these fabulous, wonderful principles, which it, first of all, does not apply to itself and does not apply when it's not in its interest. There's a lot of double language, and Katalin will be able to explain many examples in the UN system where double language is flourishing, and so we have to be a bit careful in not selling the way we go ahead and then not applying what we sold. So those are just two examples. And also what Denis mentions, I listened to your wonderful panel with John also on it and Ismail just before. The idea of variable geometry that Ismail mentioned is also a very interesting example. And the Pact for the Mediterranean that, Denis, you mentioned in the former panel. So there you have a very decentralized approach where we can get closer to citizens' concern, but please let's not use this double language as it will only backlash on us. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thanks, Paul. So the ball is yours, Katalin, to talk more about concrete examples and
I don't know exactly what Paul meant because we could speak nights and days about the different examples, what we can experience within the UN system concerning this topic. But for sure, you just experienced the fact. I always say that Obviously, we Europeans, we are brought up, with existential thoughts, with Descartes and so on, and then you go to start to work with African people and countries, and then you find out what is Ubuntu, and then you think, okay, probably I should also consider that kind of philosophy. So why don't I put that kind of mindset also into mine? That's what I'm saying, that I think the kind of approach of the West, that we know best, or our examples are the best working examples, this is getting harder and harder. And I'm telling you why I think that, because again, if I compare it to the evolution or the development or the challenges or the problems of the UN, because if you look at the UN, the cul-de-sac, why it's not working, what is working, you see all the real challenges and all the real faults of what we are talking about. Because if you start any kind of negotiation or any kind of problem solving with the fact that it's only the way you think and it's only your example, what you experienced or you believe in is the solution for solving the problems, and I think you won't get anywhere. And why? Because for many decades, because of the lack of the social media, the restriction of the communication, the previous formats of the media, obviously that kind of vast majority of knowledge, what people can get today, was not present. And today people just can in a way look at the world in every second through their social media networks and phones and whatever, and can just think or visualize different formats of lifestyles and developments for their own lives. And Stefan, when you say, okay, how we can work better with the people and for the people, because afterwards, after all, this is really what we are trying to do, then we just have to see that we have to keep an open space for where I would always say, compared to the real Greek dialogue, there is a development between people and nation and governments and civil servants and politicians and civil societies, meaning that you have to be in a state of mind that you give a chance to yourself as well to change your way of thinking or your approaches, but you obviously hoping to get the same from your partner or partners as well. So I think you can't say that there are countries today or people who wouldn't like to be involved, because in a way everybody would like to be involved. This is a major change. This is really a major change, that wherever people live, and I'm sure you all, we worked in different places in the world, places where, decades before they didn't know too much about what was going on in different parts of the world. But today, everybody wants to be involved. And because of that, you feel this immense pressure that how on earth you can satisfy all the willings or the wishes or all the hopes what people, civil society, women, marginalized people have in the world, because it is without an ending story. I mean, we solve one problem and then we get into the others. So I think, obviously, the way what we believe that we have to give a chance to the civil society, we have to work together in a way, a democratic way, with the people, to listen to them and then to channel all that into a structure, because without a structure, how on earth we could solve the problems? I think this is rather, I think, a big task for everybody, how we can come through and how we can convince our partners to think together or to find the solutions together. So I still believe that if we talk, for example, about the distribution of the social power today, which I think is the topic we are in a way discussing. I mean, obviously, we all would believe a more equitable or inclusive or just society. You mentioned the SDGs. Of course, the SDGs we just knew already. I was sitting there in 2015. Everybody knew it will not happen, right? It just will not happen. But it is just a line. It is just a direction. So in a way, we have to find the correct direction and work according to that, but I don't believe that we can fulfill all these hopes or wishes, because this is the evolution of humanity. That's the evolution of the world. I mean, we are just changing. There are just new wishes and challenges every day.
Yeah. Katalin, I understand. So role taking and better understanding the position of the other is a fundamental law in diplomacy beyond my critical question, provocative question I started in the first place. Denis, you mentioned the role of citizen engagement, right? Citizen engagement, if it comes to, even though you might not like the term autocracies, critical citizens engagements is not part of the game, right, to solve a problem. There are countries, if you lift up a white sheet of paper in public, for example, you're arrested for a week or two or a month. So I'm in this inconvenient position as a moderator to stimulate a controversy. I still want to stick to my question is, how does citizen engagement look like, very practically, beyond democratic voting, beyond parliamentarism we are used to in Europe, Denis?
Yeah, and this is something that I've been trying to grapple with within the Interparliamentary Union, because the Interparliamentary Union is representative of every parliament around the world, and there's a broad range of the definition of what democracy is from different perspectives. But I think coming back to Catalina's comment about everyone would like to be involved. I think everyone would like to have their opinion considered. It's not necessarily that everyone wants every issue they have resolved. And I think the important thing is, in a lot of cases, that people feel that they were listened to, that their issues were taken on board. They may not be able to progress them today or tomorrow, but at least that is acknowledging that there is an issue and a challenge there. And like, I spent a lot of time training young parliamentarians, and I'd actively tell them, look, you were born with one mouth and two ears. You need to use your ears twice as much as your mouth, rather than this top-down approach that you know everything and have all of the solutions. And I even found myself as minister, admitting I don't have the solutions, bringing the people with the solutions in and asking them to solve some of the problems that I had, which was my civil servants went crazy over it, the fact that a minister would admit that he doesn't have, or she doesn't have, the answers. So I think, coming back to the question that you're asking, is we do need to engage citizens to address Caitlin's points, and to deal with the point that Paul made about what the European Union tries to do is to bring decisions down to the lowest level possible where people are engaged. But a lot of the time, if we look, the engagement that takes place is the traditional civil society organizations, and those type of coalitions are falling apart right across Europe and right across the world. So we do need to look at new models. Looking at new models, one of the things that I've spoken about in this month's Cadmus journal and a paper published there looking at citizen science engagement tools, which are very much about using a different model that's used in science, where you get all perspectives, all views, but to do that through the prism of human security. Human security is something that the World Academy has been very much advocating. It's about the protection and the empowerment of individuals. To take individuals' perspectives on board, but then looking at, well, what is in the best interests of that community, of that society, of that country, and how can we develop a roadmap together? And even though it may not be the solution that one individual puts forward, the fact that their position was considered and an alternative approach was taken, it's acknowledging that they were heard, they were listened to, and there is power in the collective decision and solutions that have come forward. And in fairness, I have to say a lot of politicians today would like to engage more with their citizens, with their constituents. But the historical tools that we've had, social media has failed, as we know. The town hall type meeting model has also failed because you only attract the two polarized views, those that are far against, and drown out everyone else. What citizen science engagement tools try to do is to get everyone's perspective. And the great thing now with technology, with the likes of artificial intelligence, is that you can get those perspectives and you can combine those into something that is easy to digest for parliamentarians, politicians, ministers, and decision makers. And I think we do need to move away from what we've seen up to now is civil society consultation, as in the mechanism for consulting on issues, more to citizen consultation, using new and innovative models to do that. And the point I was making in the previous session was we have a very good example of that in terms of a regional engagement that has taken place throughout the Mediterranean. It's a north-south challenge in terms of the both sides of the Mediterranean, and it's trying to draft a new pact for the Mediterranean. It's been coordinated by the European Institute for the Mediterranean. But what they've done over the last 2 years, first of all, they have engaged with about 1,000 experts, policymakers, decision makers, youth, civil society actors, and business leaders from right across the Mediterranean. They've surveyed about 700 people within that catchment. But at the end of that process, they then had a second iteration involving consultative circles, and they've held those in Rabat, in Cairo, and in Brussels. So taking the feedback that has come back and then filtering through that to try and come up with an agreement that meets the needs of communities. Now, it won't meet all of the needs of communities. It can never do that. And Caitlin is right in relation to that. But at least people can acknowledge that they were listened to, that their voice was taken on board and was incorporated into the final document. It may not be there in black and white as to this particular measure being adopted, but you can get a huge amount of satisfaction, and people can get a huge amount of satisfaction of having their perspective listened to, their perspective acknowledged, even if it is dismissed in the interest of the greater common good at a later stage.
Denis, super, very rich in argumentation. John, so town hall didn't work. To some extent, we are learning. Social media didn't work either, but citizen commitment is it important to redistribute social power and to come up with better policies. Help us again with your background as a media expert on that.
I certainly agree. That's very much right. That social power will only be redistributed through an active citizenry. And let's set that up, which is the platforms that have come to dominate social media, which of course are very scaled and global, are designed to actually encourage a certain type of passivity. That the defaults, the things they let you do, you can respond in certain ways, but only in certain ways. And they're all designed to feed you stuff rather than to you find things. And for you to be an active participant. You're more a recipient. And so let's take an example. A focus group I participated in a little while ago had a teenager. We're talking about the news area and what news sources he looked at. And his response was he didn't look at any news sources. If it's important, it'll find me. And think about the implications, right? And that was actually a very serious answer. That the platforms will supply me with what I need to know, and I will react as I may choose to. And if you think even about TikTok as the sort of more recent phenomenon, if you don't like something within less than a second, and this is statistically true, you move on, and the platform learns that till it feeds you stuff you'll stick with more so. So it very, very quickly adapts to you and feeds you stuff that you can basically just sit there and consume rather than design. So it really turns people into much more passive participant, well, not participants so much as consumers, rather participatory and designing. AI has both the promise of changing that, because you can have much more agency and have much more information and much more variation in what can come out of it. And it can also very meaningfully enhance this trend, because it will feed you more and more stuff, more and more tailored to you all the time, that you have to do less around. So I think we really are on that, balancing on that knife edge, as they say, of which way this could go. But we have to encourage in every way we can, and involve citizenry to use these tools that are now becoming distributed.
And I just have to be provocative in order to keep the discussion. So citizen engagement seems to be one of the systemic things to redistribute social power in order to make better decisions, right? So it's kind of crowd collective wisdom can do better in one way. So, but what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? What if we need action within 6 to 8 months? Top down, get that done. I'm not advocating for it, I'm just putting the question out. What if you're wrong to debate for years and years and years, that every voice is heard and everybody is happy to be heard, but the problem is not solved? I leave the question open, and maybe we have another 10 minutes. Okay, let Denis first give an answer.
And I come in wearing my hat as the Ireland's first climate action minister. And that's a very good example where, this is such a serious issue. We needed to act globally from the top down. And we've been saying this since Rio, since Paris, and we've seen very little implementation on the ground. Now, I think if we had more citizen engagement throughout this process, if we had acknowledged the need to bring communities along that road with us, then we would be far further down the road today. And yes, we are looking at catastrophic challenges that we have to now deal with, but it's because we failed to acknowledge that there is a need to bring citizens along with us. We only looked at this from a science and evidence-based approach. The heads of state signed up, but we haven't seen the delivery on the ground. And one of the things I tried to do as minister, we developed a model in Ireland where we had a climate change engagement with communities, so that we could get their perspective on things, bring the scientists, bring the academics, bring the civil service officials, along with the communities that were being directly impacted by the decisions, either positive or negative, that were taking place, and explain from different perspectives where people were coming from. And what we have found is that there are many ways, once you actually explain what you're trying to do, what your ultimate objective is, and how you can accommodate the needs of local communities, you can make far greater progress over a much shorter period of time than you can through the top-down approach. So it is about, as I said, we modelled out the National Dialogue on Climate Action, which is engaging citizens, and models like that can be really effective in moving the overall agenda at community level, at national level, at international level along.
Yeah. Okay. Katalin, again, back to you.
Yeah, I very much agree with Denis about talking the importance of civic engagement, because working and seeing the results of an intergovernmental organization. Obviously, I run, for example, the third committee, the third committee which deals with human rights. And part of the work in the third committee is to listen to the reports of the special experts who were sent by us, by the UN, by the member states, to go and see the problematic issues in different parts of the world. So, for example, you could realize that the solution for me would be a combination, obviously. So if we want to have the civic engagement, it can't be just something floating, in the air. It has to be in a way structured. So whatever you will hear from the people, the organizations, the civil society, the experts, you have to channel in. You have to, you somehow have to put into a structure and to see how you can use it for the betterment, for the future, I would say, for all. So obviously, I very much believe in the importance of the civic engagement, but for that, you also have to understand how to use and how to teach them to use technology and information, how to work towards an equitable representation, but also accountability. Very often we've seen in different processes a lot of good ideas dropped into the pond, and if you don't put it into a structure, you can't use it. And then you said, okay, we have to know that we have to act quickly, we have to take the decision, but then it has to be a decision through which you can be accountable. Because this is also a question today, I think, in the world, that very often there is no accountability at all. Very often you just see that we took a decision, or governments or people in positions took, and then they say, "Oh, sorry, I was not right. It just, we couldn't do it." So I think accountability is something what would be very important to elaborate. And again, I go back to global cooperation, because any problem what we face in our everyday life today have got implications globally, or we are influenced globally with our problems. And so that's why I would like to go back to the idea I started with, that we need to give the access to resources. So this is a question, how do we do that? And of course, we know the internet, we know the change of the media, we understand the thirstiness of the people to access the resources, to access the information, and we have to take it into consideration. You cannot just make decisions without listening and without putting it into a structure, but also being able to ask for accountability, because otherwise, there is just no shore of this whole process, I would say.
So beyond engagement, accountability for those who make decisions. Paul, you raised your hand. You have to unmute.
Apologies. Yes. No, very briefly. We have here with Denis a representative of representative democracy. And so my big worry since many years is, what is the future of representative democracy at times when citizens' engagement and is required at every level, at every time. I make a distinction between citizen consultation and citizen engagement. In the consultation process, for me, it should be directed, of course, to the representative democracy approach. But of course, if one wants to get closer, one comes to ideas like the referendum, where citizens are consulted directly. But there, of course, many dangers occur and do happen. And history has taught us the dangers of referendums. So what do we do with representative democracy in 2025 when at the same time, thanks and due to new technologies, new means of approach, we can do many other direct sort of consultation of our citizens. Finally, I'm also from France, and my president did many direct consultations, as you know, recently and last year. But where did this lead? This led, of course, to wonderful consultations, super town halls on many important issues. But at the end of the day, it is the parliament that decided to pick up those ideas and then to put them into law or not. So let's not chuck away totally the representative democracy, the parliamentary and the parliamentarian approach to decision making. That was my only comment, but I still feel we need to defend very old representative democracy. Thank you.
Okay, that's a clear statement for democratic representatives changing systemic problems. Dennis, unmute, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on what Paul has said, and I agree wholeheartedly with him. But what I'm talking about is part of the representative democracy process. And I think there is a far greater role for parliaments and parliamentarians to be the conduit for this. And the paper that I published, and I put the link up there, is specifically looking at that. And if you look at consultation processes that have been really successful, like the Citizens' Assembly in Ireland, Parliament was an integral part of that, because ultimately what was generated from the consultation with citizens was presented to Parliament, and then Parliament subsequently produced a report that was taken on board by government. So I think it's important that we do look at representative democracy as an integral part of this and not as a mechanism to bypass it. Because I think if you do that, then you can be very successful in terms of converting good ideas and initiatives coming from communities into practical legislative action. However, if you keep both of those separate, absolutely, ultimately, Parliament holds the purse strings, and if Parliament is not part of the process, it will strangle any initiative. So it is important to have that balance there. And that's what I've tried to do in relation to the paper that I've published, is use Parliament as the conduit to make this happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Dennis. John, I need you back on board for a final statement. You know, in the chat, there's some saying, well, the COP is a wonderful place to meet people, and everybody has its saying. And it's like I quote, it's like a circle, you know, a circus. Everybody is happy there, but at the end of the day, no decisions are done. What is your take on that with regard to the overall question of social distribution of power, making decisions, accountability, and coming out with a better solution?
Yeah, I'll give an example. Some of the work that Force for Good has done, which I'm a director of, has identified that 90% of the technologies needed to solve climate crisis globally exists today. Yeah. So it's not a question that do these things exist. It's a question of our ability and will to implement them.
Yeah.
And so very much that's a science-based thing, but I think the same is true in these spheres that we're talking about. So it's really about how do we use the tools? How do we get the population globally motivated to be active and feel they have agency rather than grievances? And so I think we're really in that era, if you will, of how to motivate people. And then the rest exists. The representative democracies exist. The tools to have your voice heard and to be organized exist. So all of those things can then be activated. But I think the fundamental question is what activates people at scale.
What activates people at scale? Yeah. Katalin.
Yeah,
we have another
I'm sorry, just a final thought, because I was just listening carefully to all of you, and probably what we didn't tackle, and that's really the grassroots for everything, is, how we educate the people for all these activities. I mean, how on earth they will know that we would like them to participate, or how on earth would they know that they can participate? So I think, and again, going back a little bit to the UN, we have a program. This is the youth delegation program, and I must say this is one of the best programs in the United Nations. I've seen it work in different places in the world. Also in Hungary, we have a very strong process of choosing the right young people who are totally committed, who would like to channel the voices of the other young people of their generation, going to the schools, and they really take it seriously that they will bring this message to the world. So what I'm saying is, for example, I was at some point working in Colombia, teaching young women and girls how to hear their voice heard, how their voice to be heard, how to teach them how to present themselves, how to be bold enough to stand up and say whatever they mean. So I think it has to start with education. And that is why I very much believe that, again, through global platforms, we have got already good results through which we are teaching and educating young people to become active citizens. Because if you don't teach them, if they don't know that they can do it or their word matters, we will be always in our own circles. So I just advocate for education very much so.
Right. It's really hard for me to summarize this very rich debate. If I start with my initial question, who can do better? What I'm learning is that having a voice and engagement in the overall process can make a difference. And in this sense, I might be declined to say that representative democracies, open societies, might be able to solve systemic problems better than other systems. In this sense, I would like to thank you very much for your commitment, very much for your engagement. Thank you, Katalin. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. Thank you, Denis. Thank you to everybody here in the chat, and I wish you a nice morning, afternoon, or evening, and hopefully we can see in an analog version in one way or another again.